So Philip Glass, a nice Jewish boy from Baltimore, grows up in his father's record store, so to speak, gets his first exposure to music like Schubert and Shostakovich, goes to Juilliard. He's a classmate of Steve Reich. Has early success as a kind of a Gebrauchsmusik composer, gets a fellowship in Pittsburgh and writes maybe 100 pieces or so, which eventually he basically disowned, although a few of the pieces are still floating around, published by Presser Music, etc. He's a Fulbright scholar and goes to Paris. He is not all that interested in what Boulez is doing. He knows his Stockhausen, etc., but he's looking for something else. He studies with Nadia Boulanger, so he's another one of these people with this long tradition going back to Aaron Copland et al. And matter of fact, it continues through to one of my teachers, Christopher Diablo. So I'm not only a second-generation Messiaen student, but also a second-generation Boulanger student. Maybe it's with all the Boulanger doing all that traditional harmony, all those voice leading patterns, that seems to make a profound impact on him. Also, he is hired by Ravi Shankar, of all people, to assist Shankar in scoring film. And Shankar needs help with the notation, and every time Glass would try to put in the bar lines, Shankar would say, no, all the beats are the same. And somehow from that, it's kind of going back to that Florentine Camerata's perception of Greek drama and whether it was right or wrong, what was important, what they thought. And similarly with Philip, you find that he concludes that Indian music is additive and Western music is divisive. So with all those influences, he comes back to New York and strips down his language. He talks about it, writing music with repetitive structures. Of course, we call him another minimalist. And starts with that 1 plus 1. This is 1, and this is plus 1. And you heard on the tabletop, although it's nice on a piano too, you get a remarkable assemblage of rhythmic arrays, and particularly when done by a master percussionist, as you've heard. There's several wonderful recordings out there. Then back to pitch, from that kind of stripped down white bread, and 2 pages, originally called 2 pages for Steve Reich. In the Terry Riley tradition, I write my music on small pieces of paper, not really improvised here, and additive structures, but this time not additive in terms of substituting beats for rest, but just expanding and contracting time signatures, and he doesn't even bother to write the time signatures. So we're actually in C, well, there's not even enough to determine whether you're in C minor or C Dorian, because all it is so, do, re, mi, fa. That's it for the entire pitch language. At first, it's 5 counts. Then you do that a few times, and then you add 4 counts beyond the 5. And then a third passage adding 3 beyond, so you've got 5 plus 4 plus 3, and it's only now the upper 3. Because once again, here's the 5, here's the 4, which cuts out the top note, but then here is the 3, which cuts out the bottom 2. And then from there, going back to the first 2, so 5 plus 4 plus 3 plus 2 as this. And so it goes, and he expands and contracts, and he'll do a lot of that, certainly through his, shall we say, classic minimalist phase. Eventually, Steve and Philip both form ensembles. As you know, with Steve, it's Steve Reich musicians. With Phil, it's the Philip Glass Ensemble. Their rationale is nobody else will play the music. They tend to be playing in non-standard venues. To the world of art, performance art and so on, they tend to be much better received in art galleries than in concert halls. They also play in public parks. At one point, Phil has a gig where he's playing all over the place. Perhaps it's the Nadia Boulanger influence. Perhaps it's a subliminal history of music recapitulated because he does music in fifths. And I would say, since we've got this parallel, let's say we're in F. I think we're in F Dorian. And so we have in fifths. And that's the basic motif. The first hit is actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, as this. Having the damper pedal down seems to be appropriate. A lot of these early pieces are open scored, but the ensemble starts to codify as 3 wind players, doubling flute, bass clarinet, and soprano sax, and alto sax, several keyboards, and then a soprano singer, so a sextet overall as the fundamental Philip Glass ensemble. He expands and contracts a little bit with Steve's ensemble, with lots of percussion, but then sometimes also strings. There was maybe not as much loyalty from piece to piece, but Philip decided that he would really kind of codify his ensemble so he'd keep his people working. Steve Reich at one point was a taxi cab driver. Definitely Philip does that too. But he also works as a studio assistant to Richard Serra. He has a moving company for a while. At one point he calculates he could do the moving company for half a year plus a day, and then they could go on unemployment the rest of the time. And he keeps doing these other things. Both of them feel like they need to do non-musical jobs to kind of keep the creative musical juices flowing and not have them exhausted by full-time teaching, which I understand, arguably, why I'm a part-timer for all these many years. But I used to be a full-time prep school teacher before I went to college mode. And my feeling was full-time just sucked the creative juice out. I could only do the Mahler, Ives thing, weekends and holidays. And I remember the poignancy of the last day of summer vacation when I knew I wasn't going to be able to write for months and months. And now, well, all the time, except when I'm doing videos now, right? Okay, so with music in fifths, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then the next passage is actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Music in contrary motion, and as you can see, parallel organum, right? And then contrary motion is kind of like an initial taking off after, think about the music in Curiatus. So this one in A minor with the contrary motion, and you go up and down like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So expanding and contracting. And music in similar motion, 3 plus 2 plus 2, so it's a 7 count, but let's do it in 3s and 2s this time because that's how he beams it. 2, 3, 3, then 2, 3, 3, 3, 2, 3, 3, 3, 2, 2. Figure 6, now he's got the similar. In a pentatonic language, G minor. Music with changing parts. You'll hear some of that live in a performance much later in Glass's career. we have the big, instead of piano piece, big ensemble piece, music in 12 parts. And it's a compendium of what he had done from this point. There, he hooks up with Robert Wilson, avant-garde playwright, producer, art impresario. And Wilson is known for his slow motion tableau live on stage. Tableau is a tradition that would go back to the 19th century, kind of like melodrama, where you would reveal, you'd open a curtain and you'd see people posed in like pictorial style, and then you close the curtain and they'd reassemble. And in a sense, Wilson would do that, but with glacially moving characters on stage, so sort of like a slow motion living picture. And by this point, Glass's music is kind of like that, like we found in Terry Riley's music. There's a certain hypnotic trance quality. So these two artists are hooked up. All the beautiful people in New York, of course. It's artistic fecundity. And by this point, they both have their people, their ensembles. And they decide that each, something like every Tuesday, when they were both in New York, they would get together, have lunch, and they talk about a joint project that they're going to do. And Wilson suggested Chaplin, and Glass wasn't interested in Chaplin. And then Glass suggested Gandhi, and Wilson wasn't interested in Gandhi. But then Wilson suggested Einstein, and Glass said, yes, I was interested, because I was interested in Einstein as a kid. So Einstein on the Beach, 4-hour plus opera. No characters, really. Everybody vaguely dressed like Einstein. There's a violinist in the pit, since Einstein was a violinist, and he's not only dressed, but the wig, etc., going on. As close as I can get to a Philip Glass unkempt hair, but it'll be the Beatle wig eventually. And it actually starts with that famous Lasso Do, which is in Also's Brockler Rooster right at the end. But in this case, it's, there it is. 4 plus 6 plus 8. When one arrived at the theater, and I missed the premiere, Glass was driving a cab at the time. It was premiered in Avignon, France, and it came to the Met. It was supposed to run for 3 performances. It only ran for 2 because they realized that they were losing money for every performance, but they were gaining critical respect, made all the papers, and it was going to be soon that Glass would not have to drive a cab. But he was driving the next day, and some old society woman got in the car, looked at his nameplate on the back, and said, "Young man, do you know you have the same name as a very famous composer here in New York?" And Glass didn't let on. I did attend the revival at the Brooklyn Academy of Music, lovingly acronymed as BAM, and when one walked into the theater, the show had already started. My sister and I were amongst the first to get into the theater, and it was already in progress. No intermission, you just came and went as you please, sort of the Cajun happening legacy. And that opening knee play, and you'll see a couple of excerpts from Einstein on the Beach, including one which is a concert performance by the Philip Glass Ensemble. You can see the 3 woodwinds, 2 keyboards, with Glass at one of the keyboards, and singer.
Four, 5, 6, 8, 2, 1, 3,